Estate planning isn't just about wealth, it's about peace of mind. Today, we'll outline how to start an estate plan. From documenting your assets to updating your financial projections and everything in between, we have you covered. Coming up today on Retire Smarter.
Hey, another episode of Retire Smarter is here. I'm Walter Storholt alongside Tyler Emrick, a wealth advisor, certified financial planner at True Wealth Design, also a chartered financial analyst, serving you throughout Northeast Ohio, Southwest Florida, the greater Pittsburgh area, but honestly, just from wherever you are. You can find us online at truewealthdesign.com. Check out past episodes of the show and lots of great resources on the web, and even schedule a 15-minute call with an experienced advisor on the team. Just look for the Are We Right For You button there at truewealthdesign.com. What is going on, Tyler? What's happening in your world, my friend?
Oh, hanging in there, doing all right, Walt.
Nice.
Trying to recover from the weekend. I have two little girls, and they both happen to have birthdays last month, and
Double
we did
trouble.
Yeah, I know, right? So we had a little bit of a tag team family birthday get together for both of them. So a lot of family in and out of the house over the weekend, which was great.
That's pretty fun, though. And they, how long do you think that you'll be able to get away with the combining of birthdays? Like, I'm imagining that becomes problematic at a certain age where they want a little bit more of that individual break.
Yes. I don't know, but I'm going to try to get it and keep it as efficient for as long as
many
possible.
years as you can.
Shoot, it might be next year. I don't know. A little bit out of my department, but whatever my wife says, we'll make it happen, right?
You just ride that train as long as you can. And then eventually, you'll be like,
that's right.
I
right
want
now,
my own birthday. All right, here we go.
Yeah, it's a busy month to say the least. But yeah, right now we're just doing the double cake, right? We had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cake and the Anna Elsa cake coming in. So
if you keep separate cakes, and so they're both getting exactly what they want on that front, maybe combining the rest of the parties works out okay.
Yeah, well, we say that, but probably not, right?
Which cake was better? Were the insides of the cakes the same, or just the different frostings here?
Ice cream cake all the way. So
all right,
they
nice.
both were good. A little bit of leftovers still in the freezer. We'll see. Hopefully I don't get into them, but they're there.
Fantastic. That is amazing. Well, glad that they had a really fun time, it sounds like, and you got to visit with lots of family, and pretty good way to probably have started off your June, I think, with those celebrations. And got a lot of things to look forward to this summer. I know we'll be catching up on future episodes about travels and excitements and things like that happening in our lives. But hey, let's get into today's main topic as we are talking estate planning. You teased us about this a little bit there in the beginning of the episode. And so this is a big topic because I feel like it's kind of the one that gets overlooked a lot in financial plans, because I think there's a lot of financial advisors out there, Tyler, that it's just not an area that they know a lot about, so they don't talk about it a lot. They maybe even skirt around it in their planning and kind of just push it off and say that's not really our department. And it is a little confusing, just to kind of put myself in a consumer's shoes, because it does seem like an area where advisors are involved, but also there are people who specifically do estate planning. So do I need to go to that separate person? Can the advisor handle it all? Should they work together? I can see how it could be confusing for someone just kind of stepping into this landscape a little bit.
You got it. And I think that's the premise of today's podcast, is to, just, peel back the onion a little bit and kind of paint the picture for, when it comes time for you to get serious about your estate planning. What do you do? What do you need? And what are some of the things to think about as you start working with the appropriate professional, whoever that might be? And then, of course, we'll give you a little bit of a perspective from a financial planner and a financial advisor, and how we might be able to fit in and help facilitate that, because I think you mentioned it in the intro, but it can get, pretty complex pretty quickly when you start thinking about, tax consideration. There's the actual costs of completing the documents, and, family disputes and complications, and how do you communicate what? So you can get down the rabbit hole pretty quickly. So we wanted to explore that a little bit. And, I think, every family handles it differently. What sort of prompted the podcast for us today is I actually had a good friend who I've known for a number of years. Last month his mother had passed away, Obviously they're dealing with all the grieving and, going through and trying to just wrap their arms around the situation. And, they had, tried to find all her estate documents and, trying to get a handle on what needs to get done and what. And, he had given me a call literally a couple days after his mother had passed. And he's like, "Hey, I got a call from my mother's employer. And they're asking me what to do with her 401k. Do I need to do something with that? Like, how much time do I have?" Like, they're wanting an answer. And I kind of took a step back and was just almost floored me a little bit, Walt, because I was like, I couldn't believe a couple days after his mother had passed. Not that it's the employer's fault by any means. I mean, they're obviously very transactional, and handling of the 401k does need to get done. But here he was, a couple days after losing his mother, and he's got her employer calling saying, "Hey, what do you want to do with this account?" I just put myself in his shoes, and couldn't imagine. Wow. Kind of almost like leave me alone, right? I want to
like there should be an embargo for that kind of contact. Like when the company gets that information, there should be like a 2-week embargo before they reach out, or just something that seems like
sure, or something, right? Yeah. And I think as I kind of put myself in our clients' shoes, I could imagine most of them. That's why they start looking at the estate planning and try to get their affairs in order and try to make it as easy as possible for their heirs to, while they're grieving, help facilitate all these kind of big decisions. And, I think that's, at the crux of what estate planning is and what you're trying to accomplish. So, as we kind of start in and kind of looking to peel back the onion a little bit on this whole estate planning topic, I think a good place to start is really just, well, where do you start? What are the things that you're going to need to get together and, be thinking about before you start talking to your financial advisor, or before you start talking to an attorney about getting these estate documents put in place? And the first thing that comes to my mind is really just a general net worth statement. And that's simply just a comprehensive inventory of your assets and liabilities. So what we're looking for in this net worth statement is, maybe just a list of, all right, hey, here's my house, here's my mortgage, here's the investments that I have, here's the list of bank accounts, insurance policies. We can even get down into just material personal possessions. We've had some unique ones in the past where I think of like big collections or hobbies. Some of those collections and hobbies, I think, firearms, for example, some of those have some legal ramifications on who can own them and such. So when I think about a net worth statement, it can get that granular, not just your accounts, but some of those, valuable material possessions that you want to have control and start to think about, hey, who gets what, and what are some of the legal ramifications of them receiving it. But that's a great first step and a great first thing to do is just outlining that net worth statement. Once you've got a handle on, all right, hey, here's where our accounts are, here's what we've got. Now my mind starts to turn to, or what I think, individuals should start to think about is, well, what are my financial plan projections? That one might not be as intuitive. And the way that I think about it is, your estate planning should absolutely be done in conjunction with your financial planning, and really making sure that financial plan is updated and reflective of your current and future lifestyle. So that way we can make some reasonable assumptions on your life expectancy and growth of those assets over time, which I think is a big thing to get lost, and something that's extremely valuable as you start to head into these conversations. Like, all right, hey, I've got this financial plan in place. This is what that plan's telling me my assets are going to look like 10 years, 20 years down the road. And, I think sometimes when you look at some of those numbers, it could absolutely be eye-opening. So when I think about, hey, things we need to start this estate planning conversation, net worth is number one. And then right behind it is that financial plan projection. So that way the professionals that you're working with can have an understanding, and not only the professionals that you're working with, but you as well, an understanding of how you think those assets are going to change over time. And you can start to wrap your arms around, well, what are these values looking like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road?
It's kind of like finding out where you are and then projecting where you're going to be in the future. Seems like it's following the typical financial plan, but just kind of doing it under this estate planning lens. I'm curious, Tyler, how else can maybe you make a determination of whether you're going to likely be subject to the tax part of all of this equation? I know a lot of people get concerned about estate taxes, or maybe understanding the size of the inheritance and how that impacts beneficiaries. That seems to be where a lot of the concern for folks seems to be pointed when they come in to meet with you, I'm going to guess.
Absolutely. And if they're not, I think that should be on the radar. And I think, getting that financial projection in place, get you thinking about what those numbers look like. And you hit the nail on the head. We want to look at it from a tax standpoint, because as those numbers continue to grow, what that's going to allow us to do as your professionals is to look in and say, hey, do we have any estate tax considerations or issues that we need to be mindful of? Even though you don't have them now, could you have them as your assets continue to grow throughout, a long, happy, healthy retirement? And then, of course, too, the inheritance and the impacts to the beneficiaries and the amounts that might come through to them. Speaking of, the inheritance and beneficiaries, I think those beneficiary designations are the third item that you want to be paying attention to and getting together. And that's simply put in saying, hey, you did this net worth statement, you have a list of all your accounts and your property and your assets. Well, how are those assets titled? Whose name are they in, and where do they go once you pass? And your beneficiaries, your transfer on death, payable on death instructions, these are the things that are going to give you a peek inside to where do those go? Because, of course, as you think about a beneficiary on your 401k account or your 403p account, that doesn't go through probate. So if you have a beneficiary on those retirement accounts and something were to happen to you, well, then your heirs can simply typically just, hey, a copy of your death certificate, send it into the custodian of wherever that account is held, and then that account can be distributed, to those beneficiaries on the account, however you have them set, and that can be all done, by bypassing probate and not done through the courts. So it's almost an easy button as you think about the heirs. Those are called beneficiaries on your retirement accounts, and a lot of times with your checking accounts or your investment accounts held at your bank or investment institution, those terminologies are called transfer on death or payable on death instructions. Essentially, they're the same thing, but really they're just instructions on each individual account on where does this money go and who gets it, and allowing you to avoid probate. So they're a wonderful starting point to not only say, hey, if you don't have beneficiaries or transfer on death instruction on your account, well, that's a quick, easy step to start getting your estate in order and putting those on and getting those updated. And I don't want to forget about life insurance as well, because those have beneficiaries too. But your retirement accounts, your life insurance, and your investment accounts are all things that could have these on there. And when you go in and talk to an attorney or your financial professional about getting that estate updated, well, having an understanding of what's in place now and where those accounts potentially going to go will help you wrap your arms around, is that right? And kind of paint that total picture of where you're at right now.
Yeah, it's a great illustration, I think, of all those moving parts. And it always strikes me, Tyler, if there's one thing you're going to get right in estate planning, those beneficiary designations, get that right. Yeah. That's where you hear all the horror stories, right?
It is. Well, and really think through those beneficiary considerations and saying, hey, who gets what? Are they getting a percentage of the account? Are they getting a dollar value on the account? What are the rules with that particular account? There were some recent law changes with retirement accounts, so IRAs, Roths, 401ks, and the like, to where now you're not able to stretch out payments, or I don't want to say you're not able to, but there are a small subset of individuals who can stretch payments over their lifetime when they inherit those accounts. The vast majority of us now are going to have to be subject to that 10-year payout rule, where those accounts have to be distributed within 10 years, unless, again, you qualify for one of the exceptions and are an eligible beneficiary. But that's a big deal. You inherit a large retirement account that is pre-tax, that you have not paid taxes on. All right, the clock starts, and if you have to have that account distributed in 10 years, now the situation becomes and says, well, all right, when do I want to take distributions? They're taxable to me. Do I want to spread them out over time? Do it all at the end or whatever. So as you're thinking about who you put on particular accounts as these beneficiaries, understanding some of those quirks and some of those options that the beneficiary will have will maybe help facilitate who gets what, and give you a little bit better tools to work with when you're starting to make some of these decisions on who's a beneficiary, who's the transfer on death on a particular account. But I think that's a pretty decent list to start with: net worth statement, financial plan projection, your current beneficiary designations, and then starting to think about the beneficiary considerations. Those are 4 things that I think everyone can start with. And then as they start talking to their professionals, they'll be armed and, certainly be ahead of the game as they go into some of these conversations around, all right, what needs to be updated and what do I want to start happening with my estate, which, kind of leads me to the next point, Walt, and that's that relationship of like, well, how does your financial advisor help? And does your financial advisor draft this? Right. Yeah. How does that work? And frankly, I think a good financial advisor should have most, if not all, that information that we talked about above already, right? Just given your relationship and those types of conversations that you have with your advisor. I mean, we are uniquely equipped to help facilitate that conversation. We might not be equipped to actually draft the documents, but certainly can help facilitate that conversation and give you a starting point and help you through that process, because you are going to have to go to an estate attorney, whether that is someone local to you or that's one of these online services where you can get them done, online. At the end of the day, an attorney, should be the one drafting these documents for you. And a lot of times, when I start talking to families about, estate planning and their estate documents, they'll go, "Yeah, I had a conversation with an attorney like 10 years ago. We had a will. Maybe we had some guardianships put up," right? Yeah, it happens all the time. Well, and I think part of that has to do with that relationship between an attorney and the client is it's very transactional, right? Once you get your estate documents updated, you might not talk to that attorney again for either a number of years or maybe not ever, if you don't go in and update those documents. So when you go into this relationship to get this with an attorney to get these documents updated, you want to really keep that in mind. And if you can, go into that conversation with a financial projection and that net worth statement and an understanding of how your goals might change over time and what you're trying to accomplish, which your financial advisor has some unique insight to, I think it makes that conversation and makes those documents, that much more applicable and, really just put in place the way that you want them to be done.
Yeah, great illustration, I think, of maybe how that relationship starts to evolve and support people and kind of give them a little bit of a direction. I guess it just comes down to the nature of how people are working for you, why they're working for you, and kind of the depth of why you're working with one another. And that's going to vary from professional to professional.
That's right. I mean, your attorney is not going to be running a financial projection on how your assets are changing over time. Now, maybe they do, but I haven't met one that does that yet. And I can't tell you how many times, Walt, when we start to do some of this planning and have these conversations, and you run that financial projection, for example, and we alluded to it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but it's like when you start looking at the actual dollar amount changes over time, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the comment, "Wait, my kids are getting how much?"
We need to go spend some more.
My uncle gets how much from a dollar amount standpoint? You're exactly right. I mean, I can't tell you how many times having that type of conversation and understanding how those assets change over time and what happens, it changes what you do with your money now. Maybe they gift more now, or maybe they start taking families on more trips, or whatever it is. But it absolutely has an impact, not only on, well, hey, what happens with this money and how do I want to set up these documents and who gets what from a dollars and cents standpoint, but how do I use my money and what's the best use case for my money going forward? So many of those conversations have changed, I think, perspectives of the clients that we've worked with. Happens all the time. And I think it's most useful to see it almost as a visual or maybe a flow chart fashion, to where you can actually start to see and get a handle on, like, okay, who's really getting what and how does this trickle down if something were to happen to me in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. And then that way you can, keep that in mind when you start choosing the language or the attorney starts drafting up some of these documents to get them in place.
All great points, Tyler.
Yeah.
I think this is really helpful for anybody who's had questions about estate planning before, or what we'd love to achieve on this show as well, pointing out the questions that you didn't know you needed to ask. And I feel like we've unturned or overturned some of those rocks, if you will, on today's show. So all of it's been helpful so far. So as you, what else do we need to know about estate planning and these different kind of questions that we need to be probing and thinking about?
Well, I think it's always important in anything you do to kind of understand the why. And if it's not, some families, it might not be clear, like, well, hey, why do I want to update these documents? Why do I want to have this plan in place and start thinking about this? And because it can be daunting. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But as I kind of think about the benefits and a little bit more into that why, one would be just general asset protection to make sure that your wealth is preserved and goes to your intended beneficiaries. I think that's probably one that probably pops to most people's mind at first. But then there's also the tax efficiency for the size of some of the estates. And as we start thinking about how your estate's going to change over time, does your state that you live in have some quirky tax rules that we need to be mindful of? What does your asset value look like down the road? And do you run into some federal estate tax issues to where the good old Uncle Sam's going to get a piece of your estate? And are there things we can do now to do it? So that tax efficiency, I think, is another big lever. But for most of the families and the clients that we work with, I think it's the big crux. And what they're really trying to do is minimize those family conflicts when something does happen and their heirs are stuck kind of facilitating that transfer. If anybody as a listener has had to go through, probate court and manage an estate, or has been an executor of a will, I'm sure there's many stories out there of some of the challenges that can arise because there are a multitude of them. And I think the number one starting point for most families when they start heading down this path is to really just say, hey, what can we do now to make this as easy as possible on our heirs, so that way, they can have time to grieve and handle what they want to, and not necessarily have to be putting a lot of brain power and a lot of time into managing this large estate and making some decisions that might not be completely clear on what that individual or family wants to have happen. So minimizing those family conflicts. I think back to a client that I had actually been working with for a number of years. The spouse, she had her father pass away a couple years ago, and her father had never talked to her at all about where anything was or what estate documents were put into place. And after his passing, she eventually found out that her father had actually gone through the trouble of getting the estate documents updated and actually had a trust put in place for her and her siblings. But there was the reason why which is not uncommon, but the reason why I am speaking to this situation specifically is because inside of that trust was a clause that actually said that she could purchase his home and would have first rights to do that above her siblings, because they had some conversations with the past and with the family dynamics. He wanted her to have that house, and she had always known that, but she did not know that clause inside the trust had a time period that she had to let the other siblings know that she wanted to purchase that home. So within 60 days of his passing, she had to let her siblings know that she was going to purchase that house. Well, she didn't know that there was a trust in place, and she certainly didn't know that there was this 60-day window for her to do it. So she's going through this state, grieving and managing, and then of course she finds the trust and then finds this out well after 60 days of his passing. She even called his attorney, and the attorney said, "Hey, call me when you get the death certificates, and then we'll talk." And there was no indication that there was any time-sensitive language in that trust. So I think about a situation like that to where, boy, he wanted her to be able to have the opportunity to purchase that home. When he drafted those documents, that was probably something reasonable, where he was talking to the attorney saying, well, yeah, 60 days, they should be able to have this done. That's fairly reasonable to put in from a language standpoint. And it didn't really come to fruition, I think, the way that her father had expected it to. But she had no idea. So that communication wasn't there. And I think that, as you're going through and you're thinking about updating this, I think that's one of the biggest advantages to getting these estate documents in place is not only having them, but also having them in a way and communicating in the way to your heirs to where, they know where to go and what to do and some of these unique things that you might want to have happen. So that way everybody is on the same page if something were to happen to you and they would have to make some of these decisions. So that peace of mind, I guess, would be the last thing I think of as a estate planning benefit. So we talked about asset protection, tax efficiency, minimizing those family conflicts, and then, just giving you the peace of mind that, hey, our wishes are going to be met and our estate is going to be distributed in a way that, you want.
Yeah. I don't see any reasons why you wouldn't want to go through the estate planning process and make sure that you're being comprehensive here. Those are all fantastic benefits and uses of estate planning. And who wouldn't want more peace of mind and have a plan that's more efficient and avoid family conflicts and all those kinds of things. All positives come out of that type of planning, I would imagine. My last question for you, Tyler, is this something extra somebody has to ask for when they come in to meet with you and work with you? Is this an add-on to the normal financial planning, or this is just something that you're doing for every client that works with True Wealth Design?
No, it's something that we're doing with every client that works with True Wealth Design. So normally it would be start with a conversation of, hey, what estate documents do you currently have in place? And then, going back to those beneficiaries and transfer on death instructions, getting a handle and trying to understand what's currently in place. We always ask that of every family that we work with and every client that we work with. And then, we go through those documents and start to facilitate that conversation and really try to get to the crux of what does this individual or client want to have happen from an estate planning standpoint and what is actually going to happen with what's in place now. And just trying to be clear on what we see based off what they tell us, and then we have a host of solutions on how to get those estate documents updated that we go through and really take the lead on for the individuals and clients that we work with. And then, once we get those documents in place, it's not always a set it and forget it mentality as well. So traditionally, about every 3 to 5 years, we're going in and reviewing those documents and really just having a quick conversation. And sometimes it is very quick. Hey, has anything changed? This is how we see things set up. Is that still appropriate? Is that still active? Or as things change? Because, as you know, things change. And we want to make sure that if they do, we're on top of it and those estate documents reflect that change.
Sometimes we don't have to make it more complicated than it is, right? Things change. Mm-hmm. That's all we need to know, and we got to address these things. So thanks for the great breakdown today, Tyler. Really good stuff, and I hope it helps somebody learn a little bit more about estate planning, how you can better prepare for your financial future, as well as some of these other nuances involved in the process. If you need help with your financial plan and this estate planning piece of the puzzle, don't hesitate to reach out to Tyler, Kevin, and the great team at True Wealth Design. You can go to truewealthdesign.com, click the Are We Right For You button, and that starts the process with a simple 15-minute call with an experienced advisor on the team. See if you'd be a good fit to work with one another. Again, truewealthdesign.com, click the Are We Right For You button. It's very easy to do that. We've got a link to it in the description of today's show. You can also call if you prefer that way, 855-TWD-PLAN, 855-TWD-PLAN. That number's in the show description as well in case you want to call and have a conversation like that first. Well, thank you so much, Tyler, for all the help, and have a great rest of your week, and we'll be catching up with you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll do. It was a pleasure.
All right, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time right back here on Retire Smarter. Until then, take care.
Information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Information is obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accurateness and completeness cannot be guaranteed. All performance reference is historical and not an indication of future results. Benchmark indices are hypothetical and do not include any investment fees.